So many students were asking me, what kind of research do business professors even do? What is scientific research all about? And people really have no idea. Although I will not discuss topics, but I might be able to give you some examples of what kind of research topics people study. This is Chaitanya Sambhara, faculty at the College of Business, University of Texas, Arlington, and I am at University of Texas, Arlington campus in a classroom in the College of Business building. So now, if you're a business professor watching this video and if you think I made a mistake, please feel free to correct me and I will add that correction in the description. But I'm giving an overall overview of what the business research is like. Broadly, let's say if you have to force the research into two categories, let's say, we can break it down into two. The first one is quantitative research, okay? And the second type of research is qualitative. And we can also design a third category of research, which I'll discuss later if the need be, okay? But these are two primary methods of research. And what happens in quantitative and qualitative? Let's discuss quantitative first. And this is primarily the research that I do, and majority of the people, majority of professors across disciplines are mostly located in this area, okay? And in quantitative research, again, there could be different varieties, but to give you a very high level description, one is archival data that people study or secondary data. And second is usually primary data, which can be mostly survey-based data. Now, all this data can be at different levels. Some people study things at an individual level. Some people study things at a company level. Some people do studies at the country or state level. And there are other studies on project level or group level. So whatever that level is, in my case, let's say, I do this archival research on company level data. And when I say company level data, I collect variety of data regarding companies' performance, their financials, and then what kind of investments they have made and what kind of outcomes they have had as a result of those investments. Now, one thing to be noted is that when I say it is secondary data, what does that even mean? It means that it is historic data that has been collected by somebody regarding those companies already. All I am doing is that collecting that data and then using it. But it is not as simple as that. Most of the times the data that we get is very basic level data. We have to do a lot of computations to create variables that we can use in our models. Now, what I just said, if it was a bouncer, don't worry about it. Just that you need to know is that we collect fundamentals regarding, let's say, performance of a company. What kind of profits this company had in 2005, 6, 7, 8, and 9. What kind of earnings they had. What kind of losses they made. Whether they had geographical segments in other countries. What kind of business units they had. And these are all quantifiable and put in numbers. And that is what I mean by quantitative research. And then next is survey-based research, where what people do is that the reason it is called primary data is because somebody has not collected that data for you. You design your survey, you decide what questions to ask, you decide what options to give, and so on. Therefore, because you are the primary investigator collecting first-hand data, it is also known as primary data set. And the difference between these two when it comes to analysis is that in both cases there are several methodologies. For example, you can have ordinary least square regression, generalized least square regression. There could be probit models, logit models. There are whole different kind of things that you can do in archival data, and the kind of analysis you do depends on the nature of data that you have and the kind of research questions you're asking. In case of survey-based research, you usually do structural equation modeling and partial least square. Now, what these things are, you don't need to know, just that the methodology of data analysis also can be different based on the kind of data that you collect. So this is all about quantitative research, and this is the most common across all disciplines. For example, finance, marketing, information systems, operations, all of that. This is not as frequent in research on, let's say, psychology or decision making, because for that you cannot collect archival data. I'm not saying that you can never collect, but it is usually not that common. In some streams of research, survey-based research is more common. Now, before we move to qualitative research, it is also important that quantitative research in terms of philosophy can also be called usually positivist. And why is it called positivist research? I will discuss that once I'm done discussing qualitative research. Okay. In qualitative research, what we do is that we collect qualitative data. Okay. And what does that mean? That means that you have interviews, you have case studies, you have text material that you collect and analyze, all that kind of stuff. And in quantitative, they are hard numbers that you crunch. In qualitative, you don't have numbers. You have writings that you transcribe after interviewing people or after doing your study. You write it down and use your interpretation to understand what is happening. Now, in qualitative research, there are, let's say, broadly, again, two different philosophies. One could be called as Interpretivist, and the other is called critical realist. Okay. Now, what is interpretivist research and what is critical realist research? Okay. Interpretivist research is the kind of research where you design a certain number of questions. Your interviews can be structured or partially structured, where you go, let's say, into a company and examine the problem that the company is facing, and then you interview people, and then you note down what is all that is going on. For example, a famous methodology here is called case studies. If you have read case studies, that is all interpretivist research. Okay. But not all qualitative interpretivist research is case studies. You can just do interviews without actually building a case. You can actually just explore a single problem and what are the different kinds of interpretations that companies have. And now, why is this called interpretivist research? Is because, let's say, it's the same company, and you, let's say, replicate the same company and the same problem at two different locations. Okay. And two different researchers walk into that company and do their case study or whatever qualitative research they are doing. It is highly unlikely that the paper, the research findings that they write will be exactly the same. Okay, because this is all interpretivist. You are interpreting what all you saw. So one person's interpretation can be different from the other person's interpretation, and neither of them have to be right or wrong. Just that what they are showing, is it sensible, is it correct, and is it important? That is all that matters. Now, for a second, we will go back to positivist research. Why is it called positivist research? If two people, or let's say even 10 people, are given exact same data set and they use exact same data analysis methodology, they will arrive at exact same conclusion, because data is binary. You either get that result or you get some other result, right? Now, if the data set is the same, everything you are doing is the same, then there is no room for interpretation where there could be differences, right? So everyone is positive about the same thing. Okay, therefore, in a way, it is called positivist research, which is this quantitative research. Now, within qualitative research, the next category is called critical realism or critical realist research. Now, one most popular methodology in this case is called action research. And what is action research? Action research is different from case studies, where a researcher in an action research environment goes into, let's say, a company, understands the problems that the company is facing, and then rather than just reporting the problems and the decisions that the company took, the research actually engages with the company, observes and communicates his or her concerns, and then advises the company to change their plans. It is possible that the problem that company was examining, they were overestimating the problem or underestimating the problem, or they might even be looking at a wrong problem altogether. Maybe the problem is somewhere else. Maybe there is a difference of opinion between upper management and lower management, where, let's say, lower management really understands where the problem lies, but upper management may not know, and vice versa, and so on, right? So critical realist researcher or an action researcher influences the decision making in the company and then reports how their influence has changed the course of action for that company and what kind of outcomes there were. Okay. Now, it is not necessary that it should only be a company. It could be a team, or it could be, let's say, a hospital or whatever, right? So this is all about quantitative and qualitative research, and critical realism is action research. And the third kind of research which we had here, let's say other categories, we can put mathematical modeling, for example. We can also have conceptual research where you did not collect any data, but you're just expressing your ideas and understanding of the world, and then based on that, you actually propose why things are happening and how they should happen. Interestingly, this is my interpretation. Albert Einstein used to do a lot of thought experiments. Did he collect any data? No. He just used to observe the universe, ask questions, and come up with probable answers. And based on that, he used to come up with his theory. So here you have conceptual research as well. Okay. Now, let's say there could be another category of research where people do literature review and they analyze the literature, and the method of analysis could either be qualitative or quantitative. Okay. Where they could do some kind of analysis where they collect some numbers from all these papers. Let's say I collected 500 papers, 300 of these belong to this category, some kind of cluster analysis that they can do. Or you can just write your interpretation. Now, most of the researchers, as I said, belong to these two categories, and between these two, majority of the researchers belong to positivist category. Now, this video could be too long to give detailed examples, so let me close with giving few quick examples from this kind of research. All right, let's say you can do research on stock market performance based on your Twitter feeds. One of my colleagues is doing that kind of research, and based on the news that is reported on different media platforms, particularly Twitter, he predicts what the stock market price performance will be. Okay, that is his research stream. And then the kind of research that I do is that archival data, where I look at what kind of investments companies have made and what kind of resources they had when it comes to technology resources or human competence, and how these things all together work in order to create performance outcomes. And that is the kind of research that I primarily focus on. But what I have done in my career is that I have done both these kind of research. Actually, I have done all three kinds of research. My first ever published paper was actually in this category, a qualitative paper. The second paper that was published was actually conceptual paper. Okay. My third paper that was published was also qualitative, but I still call myself a quantitative research because all my future research papers, or most of them, belong into this category, and I have published conference papers in this category as well, where I analyze archival data. So overall, this was my quick review of what kind of research do business professors do. Now, it is important to understand the kind of topics that people may choose to study could vary significantly among disciplines. Okay, and one important theme across the three broad categories of research is contribution to theory. When I say theory, what does that even mean? Theory describes what happens and how it happens and why that happens. And theory cannot be refuted. Theory basically informs our understanding of the world around us. And therefore, the contribution to theory is the most important aspect. If you study an insignificant problem, your contribution to theory will not all that great. But if you're studying an important problem and the problem that has not been explored as much and it is still important, that actually is very interesting. And therefore, it is very important for researchers to pick problems based on the criteria that the problem should be important to begin with, then it can be interesting. Okay, so this was my overall talk on what kind of research business professors do. Thank you for watching. Jai Hind and God bless America.